Horror stories are full of evil creatures, whether they be blood-drinking vampires, creatures from the lake, or even massive oozes looking to devour everything in their path. And as we turn our eye to Pokemon, we have some strong contenders for incredible evil, mind control, mass destruction, and intelligent plotting against humanity, all done by some very specific Pokemon. So why don't we talk about some of the most evil Pokemon of all time? And I'll tell you now, Malamar is not number one, but they are a good contender. Hi there, I'm Krillic, and before we begin, how about we set some ground rules? After all, evil is a very subjective term, but we have some parameters that we can use to try and judge these Pokemon on just how evil they really are. These parameters include, how do they naturally act, not influenced by trainers, meaning we will not talk about Mega Pokemon today, as those are created through the bonds between trainer and Pokemon, and Gigantamaxing is way more rare than it actually seems, or as far as the game makes it seem, so we're not covering that either. And honestly speaking, both are probably going to get their own video one day anyway, almost like I might be working on one of them now. So again, how do they naturally act? Then we'll kind of list off their crimes against humanity and other Pokemon, and kind of what they really do overall, since they are not acting naturally. And then we're going to figure out their intelligence. Reason for this is that, when you look at Pokemon like Arbok, who can be very deadly, they're not acting in a cruel way. Yes, they coil around the Pokemon, then poison them as they constrict them. That is a natural process in order to ensure that it gets its prey. And if you haven't watched the ecology video, you definitely should go check that out. It's one of my favorite videos I've ever made. While on the other hand, far opposite from Arbok, the Pokemon we're talking about today are very conscious of what they are doing. They know they don't need to do this. They are doing it because they want to. Because they want to be cruel. Because they want to be evil. And for fun, I'm organizing this by section according to just how evil these Pokemon are. And I'm just going to label them with pumpkins. 1 to 5 pumpkins per section to describe to you how evil, or what the parameter for this section is for their evil, and then the Pokemon itself that are within this section. And by the time we get to the end, the closer and closer we get to it, the more evil they become, and the more they can be described as true villains. So without further ado, let's jump in. 1 pumpkin. The Pokemon here can be a bit mean or cruel, but ultimately they don't cause any intense harm. They would fall in line with an evil governor on Disney Channel or something like that, and someone that could be good. They could be someone that might be misunderstood, and ultimately harmless in the long term. Someone that could turn a new leaf and it wouldn't take too long. It would be like an episode if it were a series where they were bad and now they're suddenly good by the end. The first up on this list is actually Persian. Persian scratches anyone, including its trainer, with little or no provocation. It rips prey apart for no discernible reasons. Alolan Persian is highly intelligent, one of our parameters, and has a higher opinion of itself. It fights very underhanded, not being afraid to use these tricks in order to get the upper hand and ensure that it wins. And again, ultimately, this sticks in the 1 pumpkin section for a reason. I'm just gonna say it. I own, that's a weird thing to say, is that I don't know anybody who says own, but I have 2 pets that are cats, and I love them. They're great. One of them would like to sleep right here if I would let him all the time, and cats are a little evil. Any cat owner would probably look you dead in the eyes and say, yeah, all cats are at least a little bit evil, but they're lovely little creatures, and we love them for who they are. They also made, what is it, 13, 14, 15, some number of species go extinct, like, over the years, house cats specifically. But again, they're not actually evil. When we look at Persian, is it fighting underhanded? Yes. Is it going to be a little bit cruel and play with its food? Yes. I would argue that's at least a little bit evil. It's an unnecessary method that prolongs the process and the pain of another individual. As such, it's at least a little evil, and it's within this section. As we continue down the line, I want you to try and, think about any Pokemon that I may not cover throughout this, or any arguments that you might have that might make the Pokemon more or less evil. We'll jump to the next one, being Ninetales. Ninetales is seen as very intelligent and rumored to be the reincarnation of 9 noble spirits. But it is very vengeful, known to curse those that mistreat it, and cursing anyone who would grab any of its 9 tails. It can hypnotize people and control minds, and honestly, I'm gonna base this on the idea that it is very vengeful, it is not actively seeking out others, but at the same time, if we go by, you know, our holy Pokédex and say that it is the one true, you know, law, which, let's be real, it isn't, but at the same time, if we assume that it is law, then what if a child grabs the tail? They're gonna be turned to stone. And what is that going to do? That's going to cause more problems. That's terrible. That's awful. That's no good. Very bad. And then if we look at, you know, it not being, again, inherently evil, it's very intelligent. It's vain. It would be vengeful over small things. I kind of see it like a, you know, evil queen of sorts, or just, again, another one of those, like maybe a small dictator or queen that you don't want to mess with. And as long as you don't, everything's okay. Everyone eats, everyone gets drinks, everyone gets to live their nice, poor life. But at the same time, the second we decide to mess with the queen, go against her word, we will suffer the wrath. And again, that's a little evil. Here's one that I feel like I had no choice but to include just to try and prove my point. So, while I say this one out loud, I want you to know that this one is not truly a contender within the evil Pokemon program we have today. As such, let me talk about Tentacruel. Fit with 80 tentacles and ensnares and poisons up to 80 prey at once. If the water is devoid of life, it is because there is a swarm of them nearby. Originally, again, I wasn't going to include it, but I knew someone was going to say, what about that one episode where Tentacruel rampaged on the city and destroyed the buildings? Well, here's the fun fact about that. Somebody else in particular decided that they would make that location, or where the Tentacruel were spawning, their next hotel hotspot for tourists. And I don't know about you, but if I'm a predator, solitary, minus my own, you know, my own species, I want to be on my own. I don't want somebody building a freaking 50-story apartment to make the center of the town on my little home. I would rampage also. So because of that, that is not inherent evil. That is protecting your territory. That is something every animal will do. We do that as human beings. We put fences up. There's so much that we do, and I'm trying not to go on a huge tangent on that and stay focused, but I think you get the point. Ultimately, Tentacruel is not evil. And I'll give you another example, just because this one is very destructive, this next Pokemon, but it's not evil. It does a lot of things that we would consider evil, but morality isn't much of a thing when it comes to a lot of animals. That can be, I mean, that's studied, and I've read a lot of books on a lot of that. And you know what? Let's take a tangent. Let's take a tangent. All right. Morality in animals is incredibly weird. Typically, you would find that there's, like, on surface level, there is no true morality. But when you dig deeper down, you find animals that, when it comes to, like, rituals or customs, they exist. Elephants bury each other. There are meerkats that will actively decide to assist the old or the young in eating when they can no longer catch food. There is no benefit to doing these things, yet they keep each other alive and help each other out. There are animals that share. There are animals that kind of do wrong, and they know it. I mean, we already talked about cats themselves, but at the same time, we also have pets that have been here. When we look at cats or we look at dogs, that when we're sad or upset, you know, is it some level of instinct for them to assist us since they've been around us for so long? Yes. But there's still some level of arguable morality there when you're having a bad day and your cat decides, you know what, I'm not usually a super clingy cat, I'm gonna give you some extra cuddles today. And that that is the arguable morality of animals. But yes, morality is ultimately very arguable in animals. You can argue it is instinct and it's not true morality, but what really is true morality? That's a whole other thing to get into that I'm not prepared or study up on to actually process and respond to properly in all arguable points. So, tangents over, let's get back to the main subject. As we're going to talk about muck, a living biohazard, born from when sludge was exposed to the moon's X-rays, forming Grimer. It needs filth to survive, eating anything that it can, and honestly, Grimer or muck, at least Grimer will just suckle onto a sewage pipe and just down everything coming out of it, which I think there's a Pokemon card that shows that. But its presence, muck in particular, will cause anything it comes near to be barren of life for 3 years, and if you brush up against it, you're basically guaranteed to fall ill. I apologize, Professor Oak salutes out F's in the chat. Despite this, though, I'm going to argue that this is a Pokemon that is deriving itself off of pure instinct. It is a creature that lives and is born from pollution. And we already know that with Grimer, if it runs out of bacteria within its body, it actually dies. It doesn't have blood. It doesn't have anything else. My brain almost said microculture out loud. It's a macroculture, like super mega ultra macro culture. It's really cool, actually, and maybe one day I'll do a video on bacteria and specifically cover, you know, the Grimer lines and Trubbish and a couple of other like Pokemon that might derive themselves off of detritus, you know, trash of decaying material. That'd be interesting. But again, this Pokemon in particular is no different than any other Pokemon that decides that it needs to change the environment in order to fulfill its needs. I'm leaving that in because stuttering on my words is stupid, and I hate editing it out sometimes. So, I mean, look at creatures like beavers. They hear running water and they're like, well, this looks like a great place to put a dam. Let me put a Dollar General right there. And that's all that happens. So, what's the difference? It's just that one is inherently, visually, disgustingly more destructive, but that doesn't mean that they're trying to be for the sake of destruction. They're doing it out of necessity. And to briefly cover it, because, you know, you might ask, well, what about a Alolan Grimer and a Alolan Muck? I got you. This one's not scripted out, so help me or bear with me. But with a Alolan Grimer and a Alolan Muck, what happens with them is the Grimer and Muck were imported, or specifically Grimer, was imported to Alola. It then was used to go ahead and start numbing all the different things, all the, you know, oh, there's a lot of garbage here, there's a lot of trash here. I mean, it's reminiscent of oil spills. That's why it's, you know, its body is the way that it is. And what happened is it started to change into that. And all of the, like, negative, all the nasty toxins started being crystallized within Grimer's body that can fall off and that can cause damage. But when it turns into muck, it crystallizes a little bit better and they never break. If they do, a lot of bad stuff happens and they have to figure out what to do with the crystals to begin with. Although, the only negative thing with the Alolan Grimer and Alolan Muck line is that if they, sorry, I stuttered because I want to make sure I said the right thing, but if they don't get food and what they need, they will get hungry and start eating anything around them that is like human made, because that's what it needs. So I just wanted to drive that point home, and let's move on to a Pokemon that I would say finally once again is at least a little evil. Ariados. Mainly, it kind of gets a nice mention. I know I just said, oh, it's a little evil. We can say it's a little evil. Well, you know, it gets a little bit of evil as a treat. Now, the thing about it is, it decides to hunt in a very particular way, which is incredible. It is incredibly smart in doing so, and incredibly terrifying. So, what it'll do is it'll actually catch prey and then release it. But it keeps one of its threads that are incredibly strong attached to that Pokemon. That Pokemon runs back to its family, and hide lily ho, there's your neighborino. Right there,
Ariados standing right in front of not only you, that you thought you escaped it, but your entire family. Yeah, that's not good. Good luck getting out of that alive. So, it's a bit dark, but I should correct myself. It's not actually inherently evil, but come on, that's dark. That's terrifying. I want you to imagine being in the shoes of that Pokemon, finally feeling like you got away. Just a big horror movie, and then you get that twist, and there is no good ending. No, instead, you are now the new villain. You have accidentally betrayed your family, and now they all suffer for your mistake. And then, of course, I guess if you want a happy ending, you can always change it around and the family bands together and is able to defeat the Ariados. Whatever. Pokemon has some great potential for horror. That's why I love covering Pokemon this month. There is the tiniest spider right in front of my monitor. Like, I mean a millimeter right after I talked about Ariados. That's weird. Honchkrow. And I would argue the big bad mafia boss stereotype bird is at least a little evil. It commands a flock of Murkrow to do its work, having them fight for it before it decides to take all the credit by attacking with the final blow. And it will never forgive a Murkrow for making a mistake. Now, that is the other key point to it all. Not only is it commanding them, telling them what to do, and it takes credit at the end, actively knowing that it does so, but it also decides to punish them and not forgive them for a mistake. Not a betrayal, not constant accidents or anything like that. If you make a mistake, it refuses to forgive you. We don't know what the extent of that actually means, but considering it is a dark type Pokemon, being very underhanded as the typing suggests ultimately, this Pokemon is likely going to be a bit cruel to that one. At best, maybe it kicks it out. At worst, the entire flock of Murkrow descend upon you because you decided that you would walk in the middle of the night and the twig under your feet would snap, and now the boss is awake and angry. So, I'm going to say that Honchkrow is a little bit evil and probably a bit of a cruel boss ultimately, which is unfortunate because Honchkrow is so cool. I love Corvids. I love our Corvids. The last one on our list is actually Scoville and the spicy chemicals inside of its brain making it vicious. And instead of simply attacking prey, it will actually just do a full burn method, just raise everything to the ground as it burns up its surroundings. Pretty sure that breaks one of the Geneva Convention rules on that one. I will give at least some level of credit. There is the one bird in Australia, maybe there are others, but I am only personally aware of the one, that will actually take sticks that are on fire and drop them into fields, lighting those fields on fire. That method is used because there are field mice like nobody's business. Reason being is that Australia, there's a lot of land that is towards the center, not really inhabited by people, because let's take a small tangent and talk about Australia, because Australia gets a bad rep when it really shouldn't. What happened with Australia is when people settled, they settled along the coasts of Australia. So over the years, the reason why they did this is actually because food was easier to get on the coast. When we're talking like way in the past, I mean first humans that of our species, if human, whatever you want to say there, were walking around and decided to stay along the coast because the seafood was plentiful and quote unquote unlimited in their eyes. And by all means, it was, because you're not going to be able to, the fish are going to be fine if you're just fishing on the coast, not using boats and everything, right? So they stay along the coast and they settle on the coast, and over the years that never really changed. Yeah, people went inland a little bit more, but there's so much space between major cities of Australia and so much land that is not actually inhabited. So you get a lot of animals, and a lot of different animals that just tend to exist within their true ecosystem. And one of those being these great big fieldlands and grasslands, due to the large amounts of foliage allowed to continue to grow without any sort of dampering or hampering of their growth, results in field mice like a ton of field mice, like a ridiculous amount of field mice. And when animals want those field mice, that bird is going to drop the fire into the field, and you're going to get a lot of mice running, booking it as fast as they can. And that is an easy meal for all of these birds. So, Scovillain, I don't know what it would eat. Maybe it eats Tandemaus. Maybe it goes after other Pokemon. I don't quite know. I would love to eventually get there and cover the complete ecology of the Paldean region. That'd be fantastic. I would be very happy with that. But I've got to get through Johto next, and that is the next video. Figured I'd go ahead and throw that teaser right here, right now. I am covering the Johto ecosystem, and if you've enjoyed this so far, please support the channel, share it with your friends, and if you know what? If you want to support it even further, become a member. You get emotes here, you get to see videos early, and you get some nice behind the scenes, which is primarily my art at the moment. We'll see what happens in the future, and it's just nice. So, thank you so much for watching, and let's continue. I'm just going to leave Scovillain off as it has villain in its name, so how could I not actually include it? So there we go. There's your Scovillain, and there's our one pumpkin section. Pokemon that, once again, are just a little evil.
Welcome to the 2 pumpkin section. The Pokemon from here on are actively malevolent in some capacity. They take what they want, but they aren't necessarily doing what they do because they want to be evil. Maybe they protect their territory and are a bit too aggressive. Maybe they stomp on anyone in their path to get what they want. Maybe they want revenge. First on the list is actually Hatterene. You wouldn't expect a fairy type to be here, but let me tell you about Hatterene. It's very solitary and reclusive, and deters others through aura of psychic power that gives headaches. So if you start having a headache in the middle of the forest, don't worry, you're not turning into a Psyduck, which I think that's actually how someone turned into a Psyduck. You're just getting attacked by a Hatterene that wants you to stay off of its front lawn. Hatterene also dislikes loud noises, so it will just decide to rip apart anyone who is loud. That is not a joke. The information actually says that it will tear people apart. Maybe not people, but anyone apart who is loud. I would die. Hatterene would hate me. It also plays with minds and create illusions for its own pleasure, and is known as the Forest Witch. So yes, we have an intelligent forest witch that keeps everyone away and loves to cause problems and rips apart anyone who gets too close and is too loud. Definitely going to chalk that up as premeditated murder, at least in my book. This Pokemon is definitely one that is consistently thinking and planning steps to deter people. And yes, that, you might sit and argue and say, oh, well, it's doing a good thing and you're the one encroaching on its territory. Yes, but it's still deciding to rip you apart. It has the ability to control minds. Why doesn't it just send you away? That is my argument. This Pokemon is evil. Banette, the living voodoo doll, and honestly, one of my favorite in terms of a potential horror concept. Banette will use its own body as a voodoo doll as it places a curse on others, sticking pins into itself to harm others as it is fueled by a grudge. It's unknown just how intelligent this Pokemon is, so it might just be fueled by the grudge, but it's still fairly cruel in its capacities. We've seen it turn people into puppets and play with people for that. It likes to bother people, and it can be an evil Pokemon. That grudge is fueled by simply the fact that it was a doll that was left behind by a child, and it eventually grew with this malice and transformed. Now, just as a reminder, even though there are some Pokemon such as Duskull and Lantern, which have some very nefarious ways to get their food, Duskull, preying on the souls of children, and then Lampent actively deciding to wait outside of hospitals, waiting for somebody to die and then taking their soul. It's not out of cruelty. It is their primary source of food, what they enjoy eating the most. It tastes good to them. I really need to cover souls in Pokemon. Maybe I do that this month. We'll see. I've got some big stuff that I'm doing this month. So it's a very gray area concept and very arguable with a lot of our ghost types, which
they decide to cause fear, but that fear is their source of food, so it is a natural instinct and not out of cruelty, making them not evil. It is the extent in which they go that might make them evil, and intelligence is a big part of that as well. So I just wanted to make sure I brought that up and let you know that we're not covering every single ghost Pokemon that decides that it wants to eat your soul. It's not an evil Pokemon, you just gotta deal with it. Though, reason why Banette is here and why it's so special is because it lays curses on people and harms them. And I could not find any source anywhere that states that this is its primary form of food, of sustenance, of energy, anything along those lines. If anything, that energy is within it and it just kind of gets to exist. Now, it's pre-evolution, its previous form, Shuppet, eats the negative emotions of others, and that's where it, like, derives its life from. But Banette is a bit different in this capacity, meaning that it kind of does what it does out of vengeance and fun, especially as it already states that as long as it keeps its zippers closed, its energy will not be let out. So it doesn't need any more energy. It just gets to exist. Here's one that I'm sure people might want to argue is a little more evil, and I'm going to say no. Hisuian Zoroark. Now, it does feel a little bit dirty putting them here since they are simply a revenant. They are a ghost come back from the dead out of spite or anger in vengeance. Now, this one is just beyond angry, if I have to be honest, though. The illusions in Create are so powerful that if they don't kill you or your brain, they'll just make you go insane. And this is all because humans actually decided, due to their fear of Zorua, they would push it out of the towns, out of the cities, whatever else, in Hisui primarily, and these Zora would actually die in the cold, causing Zora to actually come back from the dead with a grudge as a normal ghost type and with a hatred for everything else that lives. If you don't know it, if you haven't seen it, go check out my ghost Pokemon video. I explain every single ghost type, and Thunderzolt is a guest on it, fantastic human being, and he actually gave his opinion and covered on the Zora line for this in particular. And it was just nice because I've talked about this Pokemon so many times because it's incredibly fascinating. Now, ultimately, this Pokemon is seeking vengeance. It is very intelligent. It can mimic people talking to each other so well that you would believe it, and its illusions can cause harm to you. But it's just kind of a big, scary mon that's very smart and is acting purely on vengeance. It's a misguided soul that has a grudge so strong it's kind of blind to what it's doing at this point. So I give it some slack, and it can be a little evil because it's not thinking, I suppose, but the Hisuian Snow series kind of goes against that, so I have to give it credit. Call it a little bit extra evil, but doesn't really belong. What really does belong is a double trouble we have with Spectrier and Glastrier. They basically just take what they want. They're creatures that take the lives of others for energy. In Spectrier's case, it will actually go near you and absorb your energy from you while you're asleep, or if you decide to go near it and it doesn't like you, it will kick you and separate your soul or spirit from your body. Where meanwhile, when we look at Glastrier, it actively states that it will take anything that it wants by force. So unless you want to get a nice helping of icy hooves straight to the noggin, I advise that you just kind of listen to it and give it what it wants. Both were tyrants before Calyrex tamed them. Both were otherwise very aggressive. They basically simply state what they want within all these entries and all this information I can find, that they take what they want. They get what they want, not they take what they need and get what they need. As such, they are harming others for what they want and doing so in an intelligent manner. And I will have to say, they did technically rule over the lands until Calyrex did that. But I don't feel like they fit later on, because they just would not bow down to anybody that was weaker than them. They wanted to prove that they were the strongest. And again, very much like a JRPG villain, you beat them in the fight, and now they're on your team. Pokemon, wait, that's just Pokemon in general. So, not incredibly evil, but deserving of being on the list. Jellicent. Now, I get it. It may act on natural instinct, but the fact that it will actively decide to attack an entire tanker, an entire cruise ship full of people, and drag those ship down, drag all these people down to the depths below to kill them, is definitely evil. Because, sure, there's the chance that they need a lot of them to take down the cruise ship or tanker or whatever. There's also the fact that they are Pokemon, and maybe 6 or 7 are all that they need to blast through these holes. And if that's the case, and there are hundreds of people on these ships and only 7 or 8 of these creatures, they're not eating them all. They're just going after the bounty. They're going because they're greedy. They're not going to eat them all. And there is the argument that they may be, or at least I say argument, but it's part of their information. There is the theory or idea within the Pokemon world that Jellicent, more specifically its previous form, were actually born from an ancient race of people that are now underwater and died, which is just a reference to Atlantis. So, you know, people die, they come back as ghosts, and they just exist within the water. They were royalty of some sort living within a high society. It explains like the frills and all these other things. So now they've come back and are taking down more ships. Maybe they're trying to transform more people into more of these Pokemon, into their own kind, so that way Jellicent themselves, the king and queen, can rule over others, have more of an army to rule with. Now that's just conjecture, that's just me having my fun, of course, but at the same time, when we look at it, let's kind of focus a little bit more on Jellicent again. The size of the crown tells you how many souls that it's taken, and it decides to actually take these ships and use them as a home of sorts for a while. And it's, in my opinion, smart enough again to realize that it's taking down massive amounts of prey that it's not going to eat, and either maybe it doesn't eat them or gluttonously consumes them all, assuming it does consume them all. Whichever way we look at it, it is a glutton, or it is not actually eating all these Pokemon, making it, or all these people. I guess it would probably be Pokemon too, realistically speaking, but ultimately making it evil in my eyes. And that closes out this section, as we're going to get into some Pokemon that I'm going to start saying are without a doubt evil. Not really arguable. Here, the Pokemon have begun to lose their morality. They are actively seeking out individuals to harm and enjoy it to some capacity. They may come in the form of striking fear or actually killing the individual. This one hurts my soul because he's my sweet boy right there, Gengar. Mischievous and enjoys putting curses on others. Right off the bat, enjoys putting curses on others. Lives in shadows and takes delight in others' terror, even sleeping in the shadow of the person it actually plans to attack next. Gengar is, I will at least admit, my statements previous aside, that it could be a bit of a toss-up. Clearly, it acted enough to have the reputation that it does, but it doesn't show that in the anime as much. But then you look at every dex entry in Gengar, Mega Gengar, Gigantamax, Gengar, they're all very destructive or seemingly evil by comparison. And I'll tell you right now, it's definitely intelligent enough to know that its kin have caused some major damage, and so they are feared, and it takes advantage of that, hiding in your shadow, hiding in other shadows, passing by you, because sometimes it won't go after you. Sometimes things will just get cold and chilly and dark, and then it'll pass by you, whipping itself at massive speeds, laughing the entire time, because it's just happy that it scared you. But at the same time, this could be a red herring of sorts, a false, image of itself. It could do that and then whip back around and then kill you. Because let's say you're like, oh, Gengar aren't bad, they're not actually evil, so on and so forth. Then it knows that, it clearly does, and so all it's going to do is it's going to decide that it wants to use that to its advantage. You're not going to get scared, you're not going to run away, you are easy pickings as prey. And again, just as one final point, ghost Pokemon in general are going to be very hard to judge because it's difficult to tell if they're being inherently evil, or if we're just afraid of them, or if they're just doing it because it's their instinct because they need to do it to survive. But again, with Gengar, I mean, not a lot stating what it does for its energy, actually. Its previous forms, Ghastly and Haunter, they will take the life force of others, or, whether that be through licking people or by just enveloping them in gas. So, we're gonna at least say Gengar is a little evil, as they all enjoy playing pranks and scaring people and going that extra mile to the point of what I've stated, killing them. Frostlass. Normally it only freezes for food, but it will also freeze you for one other purpose: to be a decoration. When it finds humans or Pokemon it likes, it freezes them and takes them to its chilly den where they become decorations. And apparently it only goes after men that are handsome. This could all be somewhat intelligent at the least, but it's definitely choosing to do so more than it just doing it on natural instinct. It is actively deciding to go after handsome men. It is actively deciding to go after men in particular. It is deciding to kill creatures for its own benefit to decorate its home. Now, it does also, love a good frozen soul to eat, but we also know for a fact, once again, it is going to use you as a decoration. Maybe it's building up a food supply, but it's going to place you around and do some feng shui. It has intelligent motive to kill without actually eating you. This section is a little short, as we have our last entry for the 3 pumpkin section being, well, a pumpkin itself, Gourgeist. While it may ensnare prey while singing joyfully or wander streets singing, cursing those that hear its song, the real part that makes this Pokemon evil is what its other dex entries state. It simply separates prey from victim, as it chooses victims it prefers, whether that be children, adults, or anyone. It's all dependent on its Gourgeist's overall size, as it then drags them to the afterlife. I'm not sure how intelligent it is. It clearly takes joy in the suffering of others. Again, it sings while going up and down the streets, and it snares you and sings to you as you die. And again, it says victim, not just prey. And it'll drag you to the afterlife, or it'll ensnare you and sing to you as it drains your life. These are 2 separate things. It is making a conscious decision. If it was more intelligent, or I could prove it was more intelligent, I would put it up higher. I would put it up into the next section, without a doubt in my mind. But ultimately, Gourgeist is doing unnecessary hunting and taking joy in it, making it, in my eyes, evil. 4 pumpkins. We have started to step into Pokemon that truly only care for what they want, with little to no regard towards anyone or anything else. They will kidnap, steal, kill, and destroy anything to get what they want. And they are keenly aware of it, as they are incredibly intelligent, making them more aware of morality and what could be seen as wrongdoing. Hypno. Putting others to sleep in order to eat their dreams, it is a vital source of energy for them. Though, if it likes those dreams enough, it will steal the individual away, even having been confirmed within the Pokemon universe to have stolen a child once. Though, them committing kidnappings in general is actually rather rare, or at least people nappings in general. What is it called for an adult? Adult napping? That's not how it works. It's not kid napping because it's a kid, right? With all this, it is known to be dangerous, and it is said that you are not to make eye contact with them, or else you will fall asleep within 3 seconds. And no, we're not talking about the Dragon Ball Z style, you'll die in 3 minutes. No, it's not going to take 500 episodes. You will fall to sleep in 3 seconds, and it will take you away. Apparently, it also decides that Komala is a prime victim. I mean, it makes sense. Komala is born asleep and it will die asleep, as per its next entry state. So, it's a perfect Pokemon for it to eat the dreams of. It's clearly intelligent, and while it does what it needs to survive, it also clearly decides that when and when not to kidnap others. And I'm going to double down on my decision here, as in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon games, it had been shown to disguise itself as a human and cause illusory children to appear. That's evil! That's evil! I don't care what method you have to try and use that, or try what context you might put that in. That's evil! How? Why? In what world would you need to make an entire fake family appear out of thin air and pretend to be one of them? That's deception. That is a disguise. That is evil. You cannot save it. I do not care. If that's not evil, I don't know what is. And you know what? I was going to put it in 3 pumpkins, but I decided to put it here in the 4 pumpkin section because that part freaks me out the most. I'm very uncomfortable over that idea. And here we are in the 4 pumpkin section, starting out with Hypno. Mind you, this is 4 pumpkins. We still have 1 more section to go through. Hydreigon, with 3 heads and 2 of them looking like little Muppet arms. It has actually the same amount of brain cells as a Muppet does, at least as far as the arms go. Because Hydreigon itself, despite its wanton destruction, its rage, its omnivorous appetites, and everything that it does, is known to be highly intelligent. And while it will eat anything and everything, it decides that it would actively destroy villages as part of what it does with its life, with its existence. Its purpose is to cause destruction, according to it at least. It is the burn everything down and salt the earth method. It is a horrifying Pokemon if it wants to be. And ancient people also called it evil incarnate, so that has to count for something. Petra, yeah, it controlled minds. Yeah, it forced people to eat mochi and took over a whole town. Yeah, it acts like a baby in order to feign weakness and get others to fight for it. Yeah, it basically is like making a deal with the devil, as it can give you power if you ally with it and give you everything you want over and over and over again, as long as you keep serving it like it's some sort of warlock deity patron. But, despite its evil, despite its sins, despite what it's done, it does so because it seeks love and approval. And it is desperate, so very desperate for it. To the point where it really doesn't want to fight. It is cowardly by nature, but it basically just wants to be loved and adored by everyone. And in the end, it's the methods that make Petra the monster, not the fact of what it wants, and it's using its abilities to get what it wants. It just went to the extreme to do so is the only real problem here. So, you know, with its potential desperation and childlike view of the world and what it does, that's what stops me from putting it in the next tier. And finally, to cap out the 4 pumpkin section, we have Giratina. Now, we have to consider that this would be Giratina before it changed its mind about taking over the world and fighting Arceus, its creator. It was incredibly violent, wanting to seek revenge, and would actively cause space-time rifts to open, as we would see in the Pokemon Legends Arceus games. And it would also, in that game, proceed to frenzy all the noble Pokemon, and this fallen angel of a Pokemon was actively deciding to work with Volo to take down Arceus. You know, the god of all Pokemon. our fallen angel, our basically Satan of Pokemon, but he's not evil like that. He's just, you know, he was actually set up to be something else, to live separately, to control a world that was parallel to ours. And we've seen it happen. We've seen, you know, as we look into the future, it fights against Cyrus. And when Palkia and Dialga clash in Alamos Town, creating the poisonous clouds, Giratina wants nothing more than to stop them. So it acts on instinct and is ready to kill them in order to ensure that balance is kept, restored, and everything will be okay. So, looking past Legends Arceus, Giratina is not evil. It's just another incredibly powerful god animal. It's an animal. It's a Pokemon in the end. So, looking past it having to be taught everything, it having done what it did with Volo, it learned, it changed, and it acts on good after being told, hey, this is wrong, which is I mean, that's pretty much what it was, a very oversimplified version of it. As such, I'm going to let Giratina stay at a 4-star section instead of a 5, mainly because, you know, trying to overthrow God is kind of a big deal. 5 pumpkins. It's one thing to be a Pokemon that is evil towards one or two others, maybe a group of individuals total over your lifetime, but these Pokemon have potentially affected hundreds or even thousands of others. They are creatures that rule over others, use their own intelligence to lord over all other Pokemon, or are unnecessarily cruel. They are the ones that have taken over the minds of many, or at least have the potential to, if they wish. The first one on this list you're not going to expect, as in this top tier 5 pumpkin section, I put Metagross. It has 4 brains in total, connected by a complex network of neurons. It is more intelligent than a supercomputer and analyzes opponents, pins them down, then chews its victims to pieces. Normally, I wouldn't consider this thing evil, but when you are more intelligent than a freaking supercomputer and your number one option is to bite your opponent to death, when you have such large claws and psychic power, you could put it to sleep. Let it have a very calm death, one that it wouldn't be struggling. But when you're going to keep taking bites and bites out of the victim, again, I want you to listen to this one more time. It analyzes opponents, pins them down, then chews its victim to pieces. It is not tearing you apart with its claws. It is pinning you down and then eating you while you are alive. Metagross is easily one of the most terrifying Pokemon. And because of its incredible intelligence, is incredibly evil by the methods it decides to work with. Now, I won't talk about its Mega in detail, but I will say its Mega is far more cruel than even its original form. Somehow, with also somehow higher intelligence. Which, that leads me to my other teaser. Get ready. Because not only am I releasing the Johto ecology this month, or the Johto ecosystem this month, I am also planning to release covering every single Mega Pokemon that we have so far in preparation for when Legends ZA gives us our new Megas. So, be prepared for that. I'm very excited. I'm excited for the thumbnail. If you want to see the thumbnail early, again, become a member. All these thumbnails are already done. I take a lot of time out of my, the rest of my day when I'm not recording or editing to do some art. Mainly because I'm a busybody, so, you know, I enjoy the process and it's fun. Slash. This Pokemon was said to be able to determine the next great king, staying at the king's side during their rule. But was also rumored to have drained the life force of one of these kings, causing the entire kingdom to collapse. But the problem here is that this Pokemon can manipulate the minds of both humans and Pokemon as it wishes, which makes me sure beyond a reasonable doubt that it controlled these kings, ruled these kingdoms, and changed things in the favor of itself in ways that we may never, ever truly know. And I am shocked that there's no rumors within the Pokemon world that they did this, which could just attest to just how deep their influence goes. So deep that people don't even realize that there's more than it just draining the life of a single king, causing the downfall due to the vacuum of power that resulted afterwards. It's a Pokemon that we don't know the full extent or capabilities of what it can do or what it has done. And that is such a seething, dark, twisted evil when you can't even remember the twisted deeds of your rulers before your time. Spiritomb. 108 spirits sealed within an odd keystone. This was a punishment for their misdeeds 500 years ago, and now they're released. It doesn't think twice before causing more mischief or even laying curses on others, making it very instinctual to do so. It's aggressive, destructive, and even possesses others, causing them to change the way they look the longer they stay possessed. You know what's better than one evil spirit, SpongeBob?
What is it, Patrick?
108 evil spirits! Ah! That's all I think inside of my head. It's just the SpongeBob bubble meme, but instead with 1 versus 108 evil spirits. So, let's add to this while we're at it, because Spiritomb can just let loose those spirits freely, let them act on their own will and possess people. So, 108 spirits, 108 possessions, although I believe that one of them needs to stay with the keystone. We kinda see this in Legends Arceus to some capacity, because there is the child that tries to get all the spirits back. So that's the one case of like, what did that kid do? Wait, hold on. What did that kid do that was so evil? Was it actually a kid? Or was it just a spirit pretending to be a kid? And now you've just released a full Spiritomb back onto the world. The implications are terrifying. Nevertheless, the good news is that it actively seeks to have all of its spirits brought back to it, and at least they're all in one nice, easy space where we can contain it, which has been done before. Hoopa. Now, this only works because Hoopa Unbound was considered to be just this terrifying creature, incredibly destructive, with a humongous amount of power. But that was the original Hoopa Unbound. It bends dimensions, it summons legendary Pokemon with the hoops, it drives them berserk, and it has teleported an entire castle just to get the treasure inside out of pure greed, or even teleported an entire island because it just wanted to. But it can only be like this in this unbound form for 3 days, just like a genie would only give 3 wishes. Now, that is the key to this Pokemon. We have to consider regular and unbound form because the regular form is not nearly as terrible. Yes, it's still mischievous, and yes, it's still greedy, of course, but the malice of it being trapped in a cramped little bottle for years on end ended up getting its own life separate from Hoopa, allowing there to be this separation of morality. And it is clearly intelligent because it is using its abilities to its maximum potential. It is acting on greed out of want and not out of necessity. And I guess a little bit of vengeance if you look at the pure malevolent spirit that was in the bottle. Ultimately, though, when we look at everything, that spirit takes over Hoopa. Hoopa separates from it. The spirit lives on its own now, causes destruction. Regular Hoopa allows itself to actually transform into an unbound form and fights against it. We get, everything taken care of in the modern age, and now our modern Hoopa can transform and not cause absolute horrifying destruction. So, kind of a wash ultimately, and that's why I had to say that it's only in this section if we consider Unbound Original. Next up, we have the one on the thumbnail, the one that everyone might try to argue is the most evil Pokemon, Malamar. Said to have the strongest hypnotic powers of all Pokemon, forcing others to do their bidding, then force them to forget what happened while they were under Malamar's control. And even regular human beings took advantage of this. Rumors stating that Malamar may have been behind many world-changing events. Though, I know I said that we would keep this in the natural world, this Pokemon on its own without human influence had decided to try and complete a world conquest with its kind multiple times. Like, this mon is incredibly difficult to beat in terms of just how evil it is, how sinister of a nature it has. But here's the thing. It still only controls minds. Yeah, it causes some destruction here and there. Yeah, it can control a lot of people. But again, it just kind of controls minds. It's taking over the world. I don't know exactly how cruel it necessarily would be, but I had to put it up here. It would be a sin if I didn't, considering just how many people consider it to be incredibly evil. So, before I present what I will state is the most evil Pokemon of all time, I'll give some honorable mentions briefly. Our Ultra Beasts. Many of them act out of self-preservation, but they are terrifying. Nihilego is suspected to act on self-preservation, even with all the damage it causes. And, I mean, it disguises itself, kind of tries to look like other people to some capacity and mimic them. I mean, if we look at what happened with Lily, it was acting like Lily, so that way her father would consider it to be his daughter and continue to love it, fearing that it would run away or he would go away. If we look at Necrozma, yes, it could rival Arceus in some capacity, but ultimately it is seeking the light in order to stop the immense amount of pain that it is constantly in. You would do anything that you could if you were in constant immense pain. It is natural for the human brain, when under pain, to release negative chemicals within the body that then sours your mood, changes how you act, changes who you are. So what if there was a Necrozma without pain? What would that Pokemon be like? We don't really have that, so we can't judge it. All we can do is judge it on the fact that it's acting on instinct, wanting to end the pain. As such, I wanted to at least mention those Ultra Beasts, among the others really, who again act on self-preservation or on their natural instinct. It's just that they are different from us, and it's very hard to judge them in our world, as they are basically an invasive species. So maybe one day I'll get them their own video as well. I will say the Treasures of Ruin also deserve to be mentioned, having abilities to cause fissures, melt stone, cause avalanches, and drain all plant life around them. They have some incredible power, but they may not actually be inherently evil, especially as Shenpao will innocently play in the avalanches it causes. So they might all not actually know better. They've been sealed away for so long. Who's to say they know right from wrong? What if they just know, I'm going to use my power and I'm going to be happy? We'll find out, hopefully, more about them in the future, and they could get their own entire videos. I would love to analyze them and maybe talk about them being a hint or a part of future generations. Maybe an idea as to where Generation 10 could be or could be going. And here's the part where I tell you I lied. I said there were only 5 pumpkins. There are actually 6. This is the only Pokemon, the most evil Pokemon, that deserves its own section, in my opinion. This Pokemon is cruel to everyone. It cares only for its kind. It has the capacity to take over the minds of others and has shown it. It is incredibly powerful, has its own language, and commits war crimes as it tests potions on weak Pokemon to see what the effects would be. Galarian Slowking, which technically we're not even talking about Slowking. We're talking about the Shellder on its head, because the Shellder has become more dominant, controlling the Slowking. It has very high intelligence, and its psychic power rivals other psychics, potentially making it actually able to compete with Malamar in terms of that power. It chants mysterious spells and incantations in battle, or to communicate with each other. The potions it creates are derived and secreted from the poison and holes on its horns, which it does so by mixing with the food that it eats. It has no idea what the effects of these potions are or could be. Despite this, it still administers these potions to weaker Pokemon that it might come across, or God forbid, Arceus forbid, it actually punches down these Pokemon, makes them weak, and then administers the potions to them, which I would not put above this Pokemon. And we have seen that if that shelter goes onto a human's head, it can control that human. This Pokemon is arguably the most evil Pokemon, bar none. It knows exactly what it's doing, taking advantage of weakened individuals, can actively work to mind control others, and it's incredibly intelligent. It hits every single rung on the ladder that any other Pokemon that we have talked about has hit along the way leading to this point, as I'm confident that the Galarian Slowking will not hesitate to take prisoners as test subjects and turn the Geneva Convention into a checklist, committing every single possible war, crime, sin, atrocity known to man and Pokemon alike, just for its own gain. So yes, Galarian Slowking, the most evil Pokemon ever created that we know of. But what do you think? Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for the members of the channel. I appreciate it. If you want to see, once again, videos early, you can become a member of the channel. I am toiling away and you get to see nice sneak peeks, use emotes, and it supports the channel. Right now, actually, if I get 100 members within this month, I will start putting a dog cam onto my streams, and come say hi in the streams. I love to interact with people while I play games and so on and so forth. So with that, as always, thank you so much for watching. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. Don't do anything I would do. Please be nice to each other. I love you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.